back to another episode of Tshirtcooking. For today's episode, we will be making a cheesecake that is no bake, simple yet very effective. The ingredients are as follows. We have the cream cheese, we have butter, powdered sugar, vanilla, white sugar, cornstarch, whipping cream, and the graham crackers. The whipping cream has to absolutely be 35%. The 10% one will not work. I tried it. It unfortunately does not work. We'll be using this machine to whip the whipping cream. Some way, somehow, science allows it to become whipping cream. Now, if you don't want to have to make your own whipping cream like we will do in this video, you could just buy it. You could buy those little Betty Crocker canisters or containers, and you could just use that. I personally don't like that. We're gonna make our own. It's easier, less expensive, and it makes better content for the video. Same thing with these crackers. You could buy these already all granulated and fine that you could use. I actually have a box of that, but the box is twice as expensive as buying these crackers yourself and using a machine like this to grind it up. For the video, we're going to be doing it in this machine just so I can show you how I do it and how you could possibly do it. For the first part of the video, I'll show you how we make the crust, and the crust is just the crackers, it's the sugar, and it is the butter. So the butter, we're gonna put it to melt on the stovetop, and while that's melting on the stovetop, we're going to crunch these up in this machine. What I'm going to do is I'll put about 5 or 6 of the crackers first. We'll grind those up and then we'll put the rest, because I feel like if I put all of them in at the same time, they likely won't fit. Just like that, we now have our crumbs that we need. And if you get an extra big piece, you can just break it up. It doesn't really matter. The rest should be all grinded up. Now we have our bowl over here, and I'm going to be putting the crumbs, the white sugar, and the butter, which I just took off the heat right now. That was in the process of melting in this pan while we made those crackers. Using a fork, I'm just going to mix it up. It looks something like this right now, but using a fork, I'm just going to mix it like this, and it'll eventually just become very granular and more solid. You could put more or less butter while doing this. It doesn't really matter too much as long as the consistency comes out solid once you take it out of the fridge, because that's what we're going to do here. We're going to be making the base right now, then we'll put that in the fridge while we make the middle part, which is the whipping cream mixed with the cream cheese. Now here I have the 8x8 square. You could even use if I do some math, I assume probably a 9-inch circle pan, or you could use an 8x8 like this and it should come out to the same volume or so. But what I'm going to do is I'll put a piece of parchment paper that I cut up like this. And the reason why I cut up like this and let it sit on the sides is because, as you'll see later, you can't actually grab the square out of here without breaking it. So what I would do is I would grab both ends like this and I would lift up the entire cake, and I could put it elsewhere for cutting. And now what we'll do is we'll take the crumbs that we made and we'll just make a base. Now, if I had any sort of sponsorships, this is where I would announce you now and perhaps throughout the entire video. So don't forget, guys, like, sub, sponsor, do whatever you got to do. I've now used the fork to make a base, something like this. If you want to make it thicker, just put more cookies. If you want to make it thinner, just put less. And when you spread, I just use the fork. Now I'll leave this in the fridge while we make the cream cheese part of the cake. And during that time, it should be enough to cool it down and make it more solid. Now we'll start by making the whipped cream. What I like to use is these 4 ingredients. I use the whipping cream that I showed you earlier, cornstarch just to help maybe make it a little bit more solid, although it's not really necessary, but I use it anyway. Some vanilla and some powdered sugar. So we'll make the whipped cream first. We'll let that whip at high speed, and it might be too loud for you to even hear me speak. And once that's ready, I'll put in the bricks of cream cheese, likely only half a brick each at a time, so it could mix in, and within minutes, somehow scientifically, it comes out whipped. I don't really know the science behind it, but this liquid does in fact come out solid. The process is basically whipping cream involves agitating its fat molecules to form a stable network around air bubbles, resulting in a thickened, fluffy texture due to the incorporation of the air, hence the air rating of it. The whipped cream is made, so I just showed a recipe in a recipe, because I just showed you a recipe on how to make whipped cream in a recipe for cheesecake. So it's sort of like Inception, but for recipes. We're going to lower this bowl, and I will now take a cream cheese brick, break it in 2, maybe break it in 3, and we'll put it in. And now we'll lift up the bowl and we'll keep spinning. We'll now do the exact same thing for the second brick. We'll break it up in 3 pieces instead of 2. And we just did the exact same thing with the other brick of cream cheese. Broke it up into 3 pieces, put it back in. We're going to raise the bowl here, and we'll let it spin for another minute or so. We've now reached the most difficult part about this recipe, and that's removing the cream cheese mix from the whisk. We will then have to place all of this cream cheese mix on top of this base that we made about 3.5 minutes ago, and we're going to have to level it. So that's likely the most difficult part about all of this. You could even lift it up, you could turn it upside down, and like at Dairy Queen or wherever it is that you do that. I always hated seeing that because it would give me anxiety as a little kid, and that's probably why a lot of kids in those neighborhoods had anxiety, is just because you kept going to those Dairy Queens and you kept seeing them twisting that ice cream. I didn't really understand that. Was that like a flex or something? I don't know. It was weird. I didn't like that. We will now attempt to put the cream cheese mix on top of this base and level it. Now there's no real easy way as far as I know to do that, but I just chunk it on top like this, and then I attempt to level it using 2 spoons, sort of like Edward Scissorhands, but more disabled, since he had multiple scissors. Or is that less disabled? I don't know, YouTube's definitely gonna ban me for making comments like this. Anyway, whatever. If they watch all of my other videos, it's just as bad. This is nothing. This is actually one of my most PG rated videos thus far. I also made sure to scoop out nearly all of the cream cheese mix out of the bowl, because once you find out how much that whipping cream costs, I guarantee you will do the exact same thing. And there you have it, guys. It was as simple as that. We just made a cheesecake base, and now we could use whatever topping we want on top. It was that simple. And remember, if you're making bigger, just do some math, figure out the proportions, the calculations, but it was this simple. I'm going to put this in the fridge now for about 15 minutes just for it to solidify. At the same time, I may or may not decide to clean this counter a little bit since it's really dirty, and then we'll move from there. We are now back 15 minutes later, took it out of the fridge, and it seems to be solid. It's held its shape. I haven't tried lifting it off yet, but I mean, it's held its shape to some extent. Now, let me just show you a few examples here, and unfortunately, I'm not sponsored by them, but I will tell you that when you buy toppings like this or any pie filling or something like this, always try and buy the good brands, because unfortunately, I bought the brands that were about 75 cents cheaper, and it was not good. It ruined the entire cake, and that was a big waste of my time. Nevertheless, I can't justify the price that they charge for these cans, but here I'm using the E.D. Smith. There's raspberry and there's blueberry. For today, we're gonna use the blueberry one. Now, if you want to do something like in the raspberry photo where it shows that there's even like a white glaze, I mean, you could just use something like this that I got for 75% off, basically regular price, but anyway. And then you could just sort of drizzle or whatever. So for now, we're going to take the blueberry one, and I'm going to open it with this can opener, and we'll then just put on top, and I'll put it back in the fridge for maybe another 5 minutes just to cool. Pour it on top, I just put it as such like this. And now you might be asking yourself, but you made your own whipping cream, you made the base, you made all that. Why are you using pre-made toppings? And the reason is that making these toppings is a pain in the ass, because already just getting fruit where half of them aren't rotten is a problem. And then you have to sort of make this sort of sugar mix. It's just a problem. So I just buy these different pie fillings, and I try a different one every time. And whichever one I like, or depending where I'm bringing this cake, whichever one the individuals who will eat the cake like, well, that's the one that they're getting. And it also happens to be coincidentally the exact correct portion. This is very easy to flatten, unlike the cream cheese filling. This, you just use a butter knife, use whatever you want, flatten it like that. I think if you just leave it in the fridge like this, gravity might even take care of that. Doesn't really matter. Flatten it like this, and we should be good to go. Now, this is what the blueberry cheesecake looks like. And if this was the raspberry, it would look like this, except a little bit more red. This is what it looks like. Back in the fridge it goes. Then we'll go with the taste testing, the photos and all that, and we'll come back to give you the final verdict. All right, and we're back for the taste testing. Admittedly, I completely forgot I had a dinner, but I'm finally back, and we're much later in the day. Nevertheless, this was in the fridge. I just took it out, took some photos. Now, I wanted to mention that, remember earlier in the video, I said how we keep the parchment paper extra on the sides to pick it up? That's exactly what I did. So to take the photos, I took it out. I did the whole slicing and all that. This is what I mean, is you just pick it up like this, and you could pick up the entire cake or the entire brick of cake and just put on the side, and then you could chop it up into squares. Or if you have one of those round pie circle pans, those ones, I believe you could unlock them, and then from there you could cut pieces. But for this, it's as simple as that. You put the extra parchment paper, and look at that, fits right back. Now, something else too is you could leave this in your fridge for maybe 4 to 5 days, but after that, it doesn't necessarily go bad. It doesn't get rotten, but it's just gonna taste drier. Like the cream cheese filling will be drier. Now we're gonna go for a taste test. I already took a bite. That's because I had to cut it in the middle for a quick video clip, which we're likely not going to use. But nevertheless, go for another bite. And just to show you guys here, it's still quite solid. The consistency is good. So you see, it's not like leaking or anything like that. So anyway, we're gonna go to scoop a little piece like that. Now that bite was a lot bigger than I expected, and I hope I don't have any blueberries stuck between my teeth, or else we're deleting this entire video. But nevertheless, it was very good. The crust is good. The cream cheese filling, the blueberry, once again, you could change the toppings however you want. You can make your own, you can do whatever you want. What I'm experimenting with now is I want to try and make sort of the block, just the cream cheese with the base, and maybe try and freeze it, and then maybe try and make a few of those, so whenever I do want a cake, I take it out of the freezer, put it in the fridge, let it defrost over some time, and then maybe put my own filling. I'll try that, I'll see how that goes. If that works, then I'll basically have stored cheesecakes that I could use to pull out a cake whenever I want. There's not really much more to say. I mean, this is probably the easiest cheesecake recipe that you're ever going to make. It's no bake as well, so you don't have to do like any of those oven tricks, like having the water in the pot on the side for the humidity and the moisture, any of all these cheesecake tricks. It's really as simple as this. You make it, it does taste good. Honestly, it tastes better than most of that crap that you get at some of these bakeries where they charge you $45 and the cake is drier than. Nevertheless, thanks guys for watching another video. I hope you can make this recipe. Let me know how it comes. Let me know if you have different versions of this recipe. Let me know what other toppings that you use. I mean, I know there's the pumpkin, the raspberry, the cherry, there's the strawberry, there's blueberry, there's so many of them. I'll see you guys next time.